sample question number 14, same ordeal. So we want to make sure that y is by itself. Notice y is not by itself. It has a coefficient, it has something that's subtracted with it. So we cannot grab the coefficient of x and we cannot grab the constant yet. So we gotta get y by itself. So I told you, underline the letter y. See if there's anything added or subtracted to the underline. Looks like this x is subtracted to the underline. So the x term, which most of the time you'll notice, will have to move. And so to move, you have to do the additive inverse. Now remember, x is positive. It's not the opposite of this, it's the opposite of what x is. Since this is a positive x, the opposite would be a negative x. And if you do a negative x here, you have to do a negative x on the right hand side. These cancel out, so I'm left with negative. Make sure you bring down that sign. A lot of people forget to bring that down. Okay, so if it's a negative, you definitely have to write it in. On this side, we have a constant, we have a variable. They're not like, okay? Only constants can go with other constants. They have to have a match. This doesn't match, so I always say take the x term first, then put the constant term at the end. So there's my variable term, negative x. There's my constant, negative 2. Now notice y is still not by itself because we have this coefficient. Coefficients, we always do the divorce thing. So we're going to have to divide not only by the number, but its sign. So I'm going to divide this by negative 4. Now notice there's two items here. We have a variable and we have a constant. You divide each of them by negative 4. Not just one, but both of them. So see how I have just one negative 4 here, but I have two negative 4s here? Because there's two terms there. This and this cancel out. Negative 4 divided by negative 4 is positive 1y, or just 1. Now be careful. Negative divided by negative 4. If you don't see a number here, remember how many times I say slip in a 1? Because now you can see negative 1 divided by negative 4, that doesn't go in your calculator evenly. It gives you a decimal. It actually gives you 0.25. We don't use decimals. So we want to keep this as a reduced fraction. So negative divided by negative, you know that's going to be a positive. And then 1 over 4, well you can't break down 1 because you can't break it down any simpler than 1. 4, even if you broke it down as 2 and 2, nothing cancels out. So we're going to be left with 1 over 4. And because the x is on top, we can slide it over away from the fraction bar. Now how do we reduce this? We have a negative 2 divided by negative 4. You know negative divided by negative would be a positive. Now 2 divided by 4, if you put it in your calculator, it gives you a decimal point, 0.5. We're not allowed to have decimal points. So we're going to see if we can reduce this fraction. Now 2, I can't break that down because the only thing that can break down 2 is 1 and 2, and I'm not allowed to use 1s. So we'll just keep it as 2. 4 I can break down. That's 2 times 2. So I have a 2 on top and a 2 on the bottom. They can cancel out. But if there's nothing left on top, you have to say that there's an understood 1. Remember how many times if you had a whole number and there was nothing at the bottom, we put in an understood 1? Well, if there's nothing on top, you have to put in understood 1. So we're left with 1 over 2. 1/2. Makes sense because 0.5 is the same as 1/2, but we want to keep it as a fraction, so we leave it as a half. Now that the y is by itself, we can now say, okay, the slope is the coefficient of x. That's going to be positive 1/4. You don't need the plus sign. Remember, if you don't have the plus sign, it still represents positive. And then the y-intercept, remember, the y-intercept is an ordered pair. It's always for y-intercept 0, and then what your y constant is. Y constant, also known as your b, is 1/2, positive. So your slope, m equals 1/4. Your y-intercept must write it as parentheses 0, comma, 1 half, close parentheses. Y-intercepts are ordered pairs, so you have to have it in this format. Slope is just a number, in this case 1/4.